Ben Franklin Goes to Paris by Eric Oatman. A Fresh Start. In the spring of 1775, Ben Franklin felt like a failure. He was in London trying to get the British to let its 13 American colonies run their own affairs, but the British wouldn't listen to him. Finally, he gave up and sailed home to Philadelphia. There, some shocking news awaited him. American and British soldiers were killing each other. The Revolutionary War had begun. Franklin joined the Continental Congress the day after he got home. Meeting in Philadelphia, the Congress was made up of 61 men, or delegates. They had come to Philadelphia as representatives for their colonies. Change was in the air, and Franklin wanted to be a part of it. When Franklin lived there, Philadelphia was the largest city in the colonies. Benjamin Franklin helped write the Declaration of Independence. In the group of standing men, he is farthest right. On July 4, 1776, Congress took a giant step. They voted to break all ties with Britain and to set up a new nation. They had declared their independence, but how would they win it? The British had the strongest army in the world, while the Americans had one of the weakest. The Americans were short of guns, gunpowder, ships, and money to pay their soldiers. Clearly, the Patriots needed the aid of another country, and fast. In September, Franklin's fellow delegates asked him to go to France to seek help. On to Paris. Franklin was 70 years old in 1776, and his health was not good. "I am old and good for nothing," he told a friend, but he wanted to help his country, so he agreed to go to Paris. He took his two oldest grandsons with him. Temple Franklin was 17 years old, and Benny Botch was 7. Franklin tried to keep his plans secret because Philadelphia was filled with British spies. The British would hang him if they caught him going to France. It was a dangerous time for Franklin. The day before they sailed, Franklin and the boys pretended they were going on a short ride, hoping to fool any spies watching them. But their true mission was to drive to the shore to embark on their secret voyage to France. They sailed in a U.S. Navy ship that was cramped and smelly, and the ocean was rough. They braved storms and rotten food. After 5 weeks at sea, the voyage finally ended. Quickly, Franklin and his grandsons journeyed to Paris, the capital of France. When Franklin sailed, British warships patrolled the ocean. They almost caught his ship. The French treated Franklin like a rock star. To them, he was a man of many talents. He was a scientist, a writer, and a thinker. His plain clothes and talk appealed to the French. While rich Frenchmen wore powdered wigs, Franklin wore a round fur cap, or went bareheaded. Instead of fancy velvet clothes, he wore a simple brown suit made of rough cloth. Franklin and the boys got to Paris 4 days before Christmas. Hundreds of Parisians lined the city's narrow streets to cheer. Congress had sent the right man to ask the French for help. The French loved Franklin's fur cap, eyeglasses, and plain brown suit. Digging in. Franklin settled in a village just outside Paris in a huge house. There he set up his office and printing press. The house sat on the banks of the River Seine, where Franklin swam every day. Temple sometimes swam with him. He worked as his grandfather's unpaid secretary. Benny went to live at a nearby school where he learned to speak French. Even though the French loved him, Franklin had been handed a difficult job. Not wasting any time, Franklin got down to work with the two men whom Congress had sent to help him. One was Silas Deane from Connecticut. The other was Arthur Lee of Virginia. Deane had been in Paris for 5 months and had already bought cannons, gunpowder, rifles, and clothes for 30,000 soldiers. The French government helped set up a fake company to ship these supplies to America. Deane first went to Paris as a spy. He helped Franklin gain French support. The man who okayed this plan was the Count of Vergennes. Vergennes worked for the French king, Louis XVI. The king and his court hated the British and wanted to see the Americans drive them out of North America. Vergennes agreed to meet with Franklin a few days after Christmas. The two men liked each other. His conversation is gentle and honest, Vergennes told a friend. Franklin told Vergennes that the Americans needed money to fight the war. He added that he hoped France would send its soldiers to fight alongside the Americans. Franklin charmed and amused the French. Thanks to Ben Franklin, the Count of Vergennes became a strong supporter of the American cause. Vergennes shook his head. Loans were one thing, he said. Actually fighting in the war was another. France had been at peace with Britain for 13 years. The king didn't want to shatter the peace. Vergennes shared another worry. France didn't want to back a lost cause. Franklin understood that. To change the king's viewpoint, the Americans would have to win a major battle. Until that happened, Franklin tried to arrange for all the loans that he could so the Patriot Army would have enough money. Under the eyes of spies. The French finally agreed to make a secret loan to the Americans. But that loan didn't stay secret for long. Spies for Britain were all over Paris. At least 2 of them worked right under Franklin's nose. One of the spies was John Thornton, Arthur Lee's secretary. The other was Edward Bancroft, the busiest secretary in Franklin's office. Both were Americans who would do almost anything for money, and the British paid them very well. Bancroft used invisible ink to write his secret reports to the British. Bancroft sent the British weekly reports on what he saw. He used invisible ink, writing between the lines of fake love letters. Every Tuesday night, Bancroft would put one of those reports into a bottle. Then he dropped the bottle into a hole in a tree in a Paris park. Another spy would pick up the report and send it off to London. Bancroft never got caught. That may be because Franklin felt he had more pressing things to do than chase spies. He never let anyone or anything distract him from his goal. Even King George III of Britain couldn't wait to read Bancroft's secret reports. General John Burgoyne's surrender to General Horatio Gates at Saratoga was a turning point in the Revolutionary War. Victory at Saratoga. The good news Franklin had been waiting for came just before noon on December 4, 1777. An American galloped up to his door. Franklin braced himself, preparing for bad news. "General Burgoyne and his whole army are prisoners," the man shouted. Franklin could hardly believe it, but it was true. In October, British General John Burgoyne had given up after 2 bloody days of fighting near the small village of Saratoga, New York. The Patriots had won a major battle. The tides of war were turning in favor of the Patriots. How had the Patriots won this great success? One reason was that the guns the Americans used were nearly brand new. They had arrived from France only weeks before the battle. Franklin gave this happy news to France. A few days later, Vergennes and the king decided the time was right to help the Patriots win the war. 3 months later, King Louis invited Franklin to meet him at his palace outside of Paris. As Franklin entered the palace gates, a crowd cheered him. "Long live Franklin!" they yelled in French. Inside the palace, Franklin stood before the king in his simple brown suit. One woman thought he looked like a big farmer. She surveyed the other men in the room. They were all powdered in full dress and splashed all over with gold and ribbons. But the simple man had won the French over to the Patriot side. King Louis finally agreed to support the Patriots. "I hope that this will be for the good of both nations," the king said of the agreement to join forces. He added, "I am very satisfied with the way you have conducted yourself in my kingdom." All of Franklin's hard work paid off in October 1781. Thousands of American and French soldiers trapped the main British army in Yorktown, Virginia. A fleet of French ships kept the British from escaping by sea. On October 17th, the British gave up and all fighting stopped. An official end to the war didn't come for another 2 years. Led by Franklin, the Americans in Paris got the British to agree to leave North America. The Treaty of Paris was signed in September 1783, bringing the war to a close. America's long fight for independence was finally over. But just think, it might all have ended differently if Ben Franklin had not gone to Paris. Ben Franklin signed the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, and the Constitution. Responding. Target vocabulary. Word builder. What trips would you like to take? Make a chart listing some trips or journeys that you might embark on. Name the kind of transportation. Tell what kind of journey it is. Write about it. Text to self. Write 2 paragraphs describing one of the trips or journeys from your chart. Tell why the trip or journey is important to you and what you would like to see. Target vocabulary. Bracing. Conduct. Cramped. Distracted. Embark. Pressing. Representatives. Shattered. Surveyed. Viewpoint. Target strategy. Visualize. Use text details to form pictures in your mind of what you are reading. Word teaser. Which word describes what happened to a pane of glass when a baseball hit it?